Hi guys, Geechu64 here, and today we are going to talk about how DC continues to surprise me as it closes the once thought insurmountable gap between DC and Marvel. We are of course talking about DC's newest movie, Shazam, but you knew that by the thumbnail. Hope you guys are ready for the truth.
Oh, geek.
True. 64.
Geek. Truth. Geek.
True. 64. Oh, shit.
Last year at this time, I had no hope in DC. Of course, after all this happened, Aquaman came out and surprised me with its fun story and great CGI. In my review for Aquaman, I titled it DC Proves Me Wrong, and with Shazam, they are continuing to do that. A lot of people on YouTube feel like they need to stick with whatever their initial opinion was so they don't look like they're flip-flopping. But that's not me. I'm more than happy to admit that I'm wrong about something and change my opinion accordingly. I want them to prove me wrong if it means they're improving. Nobody wants to see a bad movie. Well, unless it involves Tommy Wiseau. So when I talk about the truth, I mean the truth of my opinion, and that is what I think people want when it comes to entertainment. If something is bad, explain why. No one wants to hear it sugarcoated, and no one likes a shill. Full disclosure, I'm a huge Zachary Levi fan. Met him at Dragon Con a few years ago. Here's the picture. He's an awesome dude. I'm not a shill, I just like him, okay? So let's start with what really works here, and that is the main character. The role of Shazam requires someone with a lot of energy and charisma, but most importantly, someone who can pull off coming across to the audience as an actual kid. It's not an easy thing to do, and the reason Zachary Levi is so great is not because he's like the best actor around, but because he basically is this character. He's a big kid, a lot of energy, he's a big geek. He legitimately is excited to be in a superhero movie, and that translates into him being legitimately excited to be a superhero, which is what this character is. It comes full circle. He's basically playing himself, which is awesome. The other thing I really enjoyed about Shazam is that it feels very different than any superhero movie I've seen over the last decade. It really feels like a movie from the 80s or early 90s. Those are coincidentally the movies that I grew up with watching on VHS when I was a kid. There's obviously some parallels with this movie, with the movie Big with Tom Hanks, which is also one of my favorite movies. And Shazam even has a nice nod to Big stuck in this film, and it's not overt. It's really, really well put. But it's really the tone and flow of the movie that reminds me of those older films. The message of this movie is very clear. It's obvious. It's to the point. It's not convoluted or lost. It's built directly into the film. There aren't any tricks here. It's very straightforward, and that's great. They do a good job of making us care about most of these characters. I did care about this Foster family, and I actually wanted to see more of them. There's a decision made later on in the film, no spoilers, that definitely fits into the tone and the message of the movie, but I think it would have been better served if it was saved for a sequel. Now, I don't blame them for not saving things for sequels. I totally understand the want to put what you can in the first movie because there is no guarantee of a sequel. This is just like Black Manta and Aquaman. Mark Strong as the villain is fine, nothing all that amazing. He already played a DC villain with Sinestro in the terrible Green Lantern movie. I use quotations because he never actually got to play the villain in the movie. He received his yellow suit at the end of that film. And that kind of goes back to what I was saying before. There's a fine line when adapting these stories for the big screen. Putting too much in can really feel forced, and holding too much back makes for just a bad movie, and you'll never get to see the meat of these real stories because it's saved for a film you're never going to see. In regards to Shazam, I think it does a good job with not holding anything back. It leaves us wanting to see more, but not because anything was left out. You really want to see more stories in the universe that this establishes, and you're interested in the characters, so you want to see what happens to them. A few of the weaker things in this movie, the CGI at times is pretty weak. At this point in 2019, you would expect to see some better CGI creatures than what we saw in the early 2000s, but that's really not the case. They don't really look the best. I don't know if it was just the money issues or what, but the CGI creatures here just look pretty terrible. Then again, maybe they're supposed to look terrible, Maybe that's the whole point of harkening back to the 80s movies that this is kind of has a tone for. Maybe that's it. As with the CGI, the action isn't really anything special. The movie isn't really about the action, and it actually does some unique things with the action sequences that it does have and handles them in a very kind of different way. But if you're wanting to see Superman level destructions and action sequences, you will be disappointed. Overall, the action sequences remind me more of Power Rangers than anything else.
Did I just hear you say we're Power Rangers?
Is this some kind of joke?
While I like the story and characters, which I harp on a lot as being the two main things required to make a good movie, story and characters I still think are the two most important things. The other thing is pacing. Here it's kind of wonky to me. There are a couple side plots all going on around the same time and specific phases of the movie. And when you move in between these different parts of the movie, there are certain points where too much time is spent in one thing and not enough on another thing. By the time you're really into something that's happening, it kind of gets segued into something else. I think the pacing feels slightly off because of these segues. This really is a movie about family. It is a comedy far more than it is an action movie, and Shazam is all the better for it. It may not be a unique movie, but it is unique within the genre of superhero films. It does bring some new flavor to not just DC, but to comic book films in general. It feels like a different movie within the superhero genre. So, to recap, Zachary Levi is great in this role. The Foster family is great. Good solid message that stays on point. The CGI is subpar at times. The action feels very campy and reminiscent of Power Rangers, and the pacing is wonky at some points, I think. Overall, Shazam is a really solid addition to the rising DC Extended Universe as it continues to rebrand itself. In the end, I'll give Shazam 8 sparkle fingers out of 10. Thank you guys so much for taking time out of your day to be here and watch this video. If you like this video, please like and subscribe, or don't. I'm not a beggar. I'm Pichu64, and I'll always tell you the truth.